pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thanks for attending our public hearing this evening on Monday, January 13th for our 2025-26 budget. The format will open it up with a resolution and presentation. We'll start off with our auditor, Brendan Kennedy, who's on our teams right now. He'll go over our audit process and where we are deficit-wise and just give you guys an update on that. And then from there, we'll turn it over to our treasurer, Leslie, and she will commence and go over the village budget, and then we'll have a question and answer period. Okay? With that, can I have a motion to open this public hearing?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Okay. Brendan, with that, I will turn it over to you.
All right.
Turn this
So, just a terminology. Oops. Hold on a second here. Let me share my screen. So the village has an external auditor named PKF O'Connor Davies. I am also an auditor, but I'm in this particular instance I'm supporting the village with their accounting. Obviously, there was a bit of work inherited, and my job is to help the village get caught up with all their compliance reporting and things of that nature. So the last time I presented to you folks was back in June. So a little over 6 months ago, we gave an update, and during that update, we went through where the village stood. At that point in time, the 22 audit, we're a February year end, our 22 audit was in progress. I believe our 22 AFR, which is our report we filed with the state of New York, was in progress, and I gave a little update about what to expect for 23 and 24. So today we're gonna talk about what's transpired since June, and we're pleased to report that we've made some good progress, and we are on the verge of being caught up, which will be good. So since then, the 21-22 financial audits were completed. The 23 audit, so we're talking February 28th, 23, is substantially completed. There's a few open items. It's very critical that we get those items because, and we'll talk about the opinions we've been getting, we really need that clean opinion on our balance sheet. So there's just a couple of cutoff invoices the auditors are looking for, and we're gonna hopefully get those soon. Concurrently, the 24 audit, so it's a leap year, 24, so February 29th, 2024, they actually started. We've gotten our AFRs, our 22 and 23 AFR, with the state comptroller reviewed and approved, and excuse me, and the 24 AFR is ready to be prepared, and generally that takes about a day to do, but we can get that into OSC. And once that 24 AFR is filed, at least for a brief moment in time, because we're rapidly approaching our 25 year end, we will be caught up with compliance reporting with the state of New York. So again, once that report is filed, in the eyes of the state comptroller in terms of their internal reporting, we're officially caught up. That would be the first time in a long time that has happened. We've had the full implementation of Edmunds. I believe all the modules are up and running. That was mostly running back in June, but I know there's a couple open areas. Also, we've kind of gotten some resolution regarding some EFC funding matters. And if you recall, one of the things I first noted was we had this major wastewater treatment plant project back in 2019, 2020, 21, at which point it was essentially finalized. And while looking through EFC documentation, we noted there was about $1,040,000 in drawn down funds that we had not received from EFC. We immediately went through the process of finding whatever paperwork was needed. In some cases, it was simply a signature that needed to be received. And so we've, at this point, as of today, and this will partially be reflected in the 24 financials, we've either received all of that money from EFC, or EFC is holding it on our behalf, and they've agreed to apply that against future debt service payments. And so the village will be receiving that money. We also subsequently received a grant from our local assemblyman and senator. We were able to get a grant from the state of New York to help cover the interest on those deficit bands that we issued to right our financial ship. So some good things have transpired here. So we're actually on the verge of being caught up, and some of that money that we didn't claim in the past is coming our way. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward. So the 23 records reconstruction, you know, a lot of work went into that, dealing with the prior administration. Again, they kind of left some significant things were omitted. And so we had our hands full going through and trying to reconstruct. And it was harder too, because those people who were handling the books back then weren't around. Obviously, you know, worked with department staff to do the best we could. And so really the objective with the 23 reconstruction period was to make sure that as of 2/28/2023, we had a good balance sheet. And so why is it so important to have a clean balance sheet at that point in time? Well, in order to get an overall clean auditor's report from PKF O'Connor Davies, we need a full 12 months of clean activity. So having a clean starting point for 2020 at the end of 23 meant that for the 24 period, which they're in the process of auditing, we can get that unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion. So that was the focus of the 23 reconstruction, and obviously trying to roll forward cash and make sure that was properly reconciled. So again, we're in the process of wrapping up that 23 audit, and we're hopeful that you know, as long as we get those handful of items we owe them, we'll get the clean opinion on the balance sheet only. So a little roll forward of our financial condition. This table, if you can see it well, and I have no idea how big the monitor is or the screen is by you folks, but in essence, that top line net change in fund balance is how did that fund perform during the year, and where did our deficit end at the end of the year? And so you have to look at it really by fund. And a couple things happened here. One, you can see in the general fund for 23, there was a budgetary deficit. Our expenses exceeded our revenues by $317,000. The deficit that was in the capital projects fund was moved to the sewer fund, okay? And that was mostly done because that deficit in the capital projects fund doesn't generate revenues, and it was that deficit in the capital projects fund was entirely related to the wastewater treatment plant. Okay, and that was, so that got moved over. The water fund did fine. The revenues exceeded the expenditures in the water fund. And then you can see mostly entirely actually because of the transfer of that deficit, the sewer fund obviously deteriorated. And then we consolidated the recreation fund into the general fund. There was no need to have a separate fund there, so we just consolidated our reporting. So when you look at everything in total, you know, and being mindful that the capital projects and sewer fund was really just a reclass, it shows our equity increased $120,900. And so, you know, at first blush, you'd say, okay, not too bad. But then you really got to dive in and think about the reality of the situation. During 2023, this reporting period, we received $677,000 in FEMA funds. Now that represents expenditures we incurred in prior periods, and we finally got the money. But those grant proceeds, or those revenues, are what I would call one-shots. Those aren't revenues you're going to get every single year. And so when you look at that general fund, absent the FEMA funds, the general fund on a budgetary basis would have been in the hole $1 million. And that total change in governmental funds from 120,000 would have been closer to a deterioration of $500,000 if you normalize that. But we did get the FEMA money. That is there. It's ours. It's booked. But we can't count on that in future periods. Okay. And so at the end of 2023, this was a line I've presented in the past, is we had about $1.9 million in liabilities, and there were some significant past due balances. In particular, the village's health insurance and pension contributions payable had not been paid at 2/28/2023. All right, and now this is in essence what the current administration inherited. And so this is where the folks, and not only did they inherit this, unfortunately, there's also the 24 period, which we're about to go through. The budget for 2024 was also done by the previous administration. So not only do we inherit this, but we inherit about what's to come here. You know, similar for 2024, there was a fair amount of work that we had to do. The game got up though, and I've had this conversation with the mayor and our treasurer and the folks. If we want a clean opinion for 2024, we have to make sure everything is accounted for properly in the right fund. And so we really rolled up our sleeves with the 24 reconciliation and went through every single bank statement. We went through every single bank statement to make sure that everything was reported. There was a lot less estimation in the 24 reconstruction and a lot more detailed vouching. And so we went through every bank statement, made sure every dollar that came in was reported, made sure everything in the trial balance, or the accounting records, if you will, could tie to the bank statements, and really made sure on a cash basis that everything got booked. And once we have that, we could then make sure all of the year-end reconciliations, many of which are just dealing with, you know, expenditure cutoff or revenue cutoff, your receivables, and your payables, were properly reconciled and accounted. And so for the 24 period, our confidence level is even significantly higher, and we're very optimistic that we're going to get that clean auditor's report that we're looking from our auditors. Obviously, that audit's just starting, and as things develop, we'll continue to share information. So here's that same table, but this is for 2024. Okay. And again, you're looking at this saying, geez, we actually made $110,000. Not too bad. So our deficit actually improved from about 1.4 million, and it went down to about 1.3 million. But then again, there's the catch. 2 years in a row, money came in that we cannot expect in future periods. The financial condition of the village improved by 110, but we received almost $560,000 of that old EFC money that was due to us. So during the 24 reporting period, through the efforts of the mayor and his team, working with EFC, we got 560 of that $1.04 million that was due to us from EFC. It required submission of multiple documents and a little bit of records reconstruction, and I believe there was an organization that helped us, put all that together and get the money. So when you look at that sewer fund column, and the increase in fund balance of $492,974, that is entirely driven by $559,000 in EFC funds. Absent that money, which we won't get again, our deficit would have essentially gotten a little worse in the sewer fund. And you can also see 2 years in a row, the general fund generated deficit, which is, and we'll get to it, but in essence, there's a budgetary deficit. This is for the period ending 2/29/24. And so to paint the picture, the new administration, the new treasurer comes in, they're going through the finances, they're paying all these old bills, and they realize pretty early on, I think they figured it out by mid-spring, late spring, that, hey, we're gonna run out of money. And so also during this 24 period is when we got the $4.4 million in bans. And those are the deficit bans that we've issued. So as of 2/29/24, the village used about 2 million of these bans to liquidate past due liabilities. And if you recall, on the previous slide, I said there was about 1.9 million in past due liabilities. So by the end of 24, we're fully caught up in our payables, other than the normal transactions and liquidating those. And we have the remaining 2.4 million of those ban proceeds invested in NICLAS. So NICLAS is in essence a government-operated money market fund. It's a very common investment product, very highly rated, AAA rated investment product used by governments in the state of New York. And as a result of just keeping that money there, we earned $66,000 in interest income. So 23 and 24. In essence, because of one-shot non-recurring revenues, in 23 it was FEMA, in 24 it was EFC, we were kind of able to skate through. But that doesn't actually address the problem, because those are non-recurring sources of revenue. And so it's pretty clear, absent FEMA money, absent EFC, there was a budgetary deficit in the general fund and the sewer fund. And if you recall, when we met, I think we also met in January of 24, around the same time, we were going through some discussions about, tax increases and water and sewer rate increases. And as we look back, and obviously we'll be looking forward and reconciling all that, it's pretty clear that 6 years of no tax increases, 6 years of no water rate increases, put us on the wrong path. And as the numbers are pointing out, absent tax increases, we are in a deficit position in the general fund, and we were heading towards and are in a deficit position in our sewer fund, and that's what the deficit bans were used to rectify. However, even then, it's just those rate increases, tax and sewer, that are ultimately going to get us out of the deficit position, because these deficit bans and bonds have to be repaid. So now, as we look forward, we have these deficit bans. They're going to be converted to bonds. They come with strings. So first of which, and we talked about 23 and how important it was to our auditor's report, it's also going to be audited by and certified by the state comptroller. And so when you take deficit bonds and bans, it comes with strings. And this village is now, at least temporarily, under the thumb of the state comptroller. That deficit has to be certified by the auditors before we can proceed, and I believe that's currently in process. In addition, our budget is subject to OSC review. We have these weekly status calls with members of village management, and an OSC representative has also been participating. And so OSC is now involved in the review of our annual budget for the 25-26 cycle, and they're going to help ensure that the budgeted expenses are reasonable and that we have appropriate revenues in place to repay and fund our budget along with any deficit bond payments that are due. And so there's an extra level of regulation that comes with what we're doing with these deficit bans. The state comptroller is now involved in overseeing our finances to some degree. So again, when we issued these bans, we were uncertain of the of how bad it was going to get because we did not have detailed financial records. Well, we're almost caught up. We're getting very close, and what we can see is we don't think we're going to need the entire 4.4. As mentioned at the end of 24, we've only used about 2 million of that. I believe Leslie and the mayor can tell you where we're at now. I think we might have used a little bit more, but not much. And so OSC is only going to let us borrow what they certify to. Okay, and so if we only need 2.5, we'll borrow 2.5, and the remaining, we'll make it a nice round number. We'll say if we borrow 2.4, that means the 2 million in money that we have invested in NICLAS, it's sitting there, it's liquid. We'll use that to pay down the ban, and the remaining portion of the ban will be refinanced on a long-term basis. So we are only permitted to borrow what we need and not a penny more. So, and that process is underway as well. Going forward, just a tentative timeline here of what I would expect. Again, we're on the verge of being caught up. So we're in January 25 right now. Ideally, we'll get those remaining documents to our auditors so they can wrap up the 23 audit. PKF for Hunter Davies has started the 24 audit, and we should be able to prepare and file the AFR with OSC. When that is filed, again, as far as AFR goes, we're officially caught up. Unfortunately, February 25 is right around the corner, which means we have another year to make sure our records are complete. And so in February 25, ideally, we'll wrap up that 24 financial audit. For a brief moment in time, we'll be caught up on both the audits and the AFR. However, in March and April, we immediately need to shift gears to closing out February 28th, 2025. So that will be our next reporting period, which is coming up here in a little over a month and a half. So in March and April, we'll work towards closing out the 25 period. In May, once we've closed out, we've done all of our reconciliations, we're up to date, we can prepare and file the 25 AFR. And again, on time, for the first time in a long time, our AFR will be filed on time for the 25 closeout. And at that point, we're going to start getting closer to having to refinance those bans. And so the investors are going to want to see updated financial information. And so we actually need to start the 25 audit sooner than later. Ideally, PKF will do some prelim audit work, and then in the June-July timeframe, conduct their audit of our 25 finances and get those financial statements up to date. And so the goal would be to be entirely caught up, AFRs, audits, etc., by summer of 25, And then from there, it's just a matter of maintaining our accounting records on a regular basis and staying up to date with whatever comes our way. So I think those were all of my prepared remarks. I did a heck of a lot of talking. If there's any questions that folks have, I'm happy to do my best to answer them. If there's any questions the board has or anyone, just let me know. And you know, if you think of your question tonight, tomorrow, or you know, next week, you can always submit it to the mayor or the board or the treasurer, and I can respond back as quickly as I can. So with that, I'll turn it back to the mayor and leave it open for any questions that folks might have.
Thank you, Brandon. Great presentation, appreciate it very much.
Mayor, you're on mute. There you go.
Okay, Brandon, thank you. Thank you for the presentation, really good information. For folks that were here last year, some of this is kind of almost a refresher, repeat, and bringing it into, but showing again the progress that's been made since we have been in office going on year 2 here, and where we stand with most of the auditing and the details behind that. So if anyone has any questions for Brendan, please raise your hand and we'll try to get that answer for you. Yes, Sean, and just name and address would be helpful for the record. Thank you.
Sean Hagerty for Belvoir Drive. My question is about the future budgetary highlights in that section there. You said we made $66,000 in interest on the $2.5 million sitting in the bank. How much? What is the percent of interest that we are paying on that money since we're borrowing? And what's the offset? And do we leave the $66,000 in the bank to collect more, or has been spent?
So the actual interest expense that you paid on the ban is going to be higher. And it's going to be higher for a couple of reasons. The ban was issued at about 7%, and so you have to pay 7% on the full 4.4 million, which I believe would have been about $308,000 that was due and payable in October of 2024. Now, the good news, and so obviously 308,000 is going to far exceed the money we made on the NICLAS investment because, one, the rate was lower. I want to say in NICLAS, the rate of return was probably hovering around 5%, not 7%, and we only had, 2.4 million in there. So, and again, that 66,000 was for an abbreviated period of time. That was October of 23 to February of 24, and that debt service or that interest payment I'm referring to, would have been a full 12 months. So legally, you can't have, it's called arbitrage, but you would never. You really aren't. The federal government frowns on people borrowing money at lower rates and then attempting to make more money in interest. And so that would be taxable income, which is quite rare for governments. But that, going back to that $308,000, the village was given a grant to pay for that, which was fantastic. So when we report on the 25 financial information, when we have that available for everyone, you're going to see a $308,000 expense for the ban interest, and you're going to see a $308,000 grant from the state of New York. They kind of stepped up and helped us, trying to help us minimize that deficit of ours, and so. That's going to help us for the 25 period. Going forward, obviously the amount of ban proceeds we don't use are going to be repaid, but we're only going to pay interest on, that reduced amount we borrow. And, rates are a little higher right now, but, we'll have to see what the appetite is for our debt and what those rates will be, going forward. But to directly answer your question, we'll never make more money on interest, than we would pay the interest. The rates that we get in NICLAS are lower, and we have less money in there. So
Is
hopefully
there a
that was,
restriction on what they do with the $66,000? Should that be used to pay back, help pay back the money we borrowed, or are they spending it? Has it been spent?
it was deposited, it was reinvested. So
That's
the
fine.
that money was not spent, it stayed in NICLAS and was reinvested, so it's there.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question? Anthony?
Yeah, Anthony Grice, 11 North Street. I noticed when I looked online, I did not see the quarterly financial statements for this municipality. And that just really helps us, the public to know if the revenue is in line, on each quarter. I also noticed that you didn't say anything about the Moody's fiscal stress score.
Did you hear that, Brendan?
I did not, can you, repeat the question for me?
The quarterly financial statements, I didn't see them online, so I don't know if they're available. And then the Moody's fiscal stress score.
Did you hear the first part? Talking about
What was the first?
Quarterly reporting?
Quarterly reporting.
Specific year you're talking about, Anthony? Or just?
Last year. I
Just in
didn't see
general?
it for any year when I looked online.
So,
The annual audit is online.
Right, but usually most municipalities do a quarterly as well, in their accounting department. They do a quarterly, just to make sure, this quarter we went over budget, this quarter we were under budget in the certain areas.
yeah, so, in a perfect world, every month, the board should be getting a financial report of their expenditures
Right.
versus the budgeted line items.
Right.
And I think that's what Anthony's talking about.
Yeah.
And so Anthony's suggesting quarterly perhaps. In a perfect world, it's done and monitored more frequently than that. The problem with 23 and 24 is the budget was not input into QuickBooks. And so from the time of, and QuickBooks is a great product, it's not necessarily designed for municipalities. And, the administration somewhat recognized that and migrated to Edmunds. So, the board should at least have been reviewing, the invoices and abstracts and things like that, which I believe they have. I don't, as their accountant, I didn't specifically test that, but I believe the auditors do look at that. From the time we implemented Edmunds, which would have been almost 11 months ago, would have been the board's first opportunity to kind of examine budget to actual reports on a monthly basis. And I'd have to defer to the mayor and treasurer as to what that process looks like. But for the 23 and 24 reporting period that I was helping with, that data was not in place for the administration to perform. The 23 budget and the 24 budget were prepared by the prior administration, and they were not input into QuickBooks. And so, in a proper accounting system, you should be able to push a button and out pops a budget to actual report, and you can go through line item by line item, which I believe is what Anthony's suggesting. Right. And you can identify if there's line items that are over budget, and perhaps you make budget amendments to correct that. either you appropriate fund balance, or you identify a revenue, or you reclassify it from another line item. But that did not happen during 23 and the 24 period.
Yeah, that's exactly, as a business owner, we use QuickBooks, and I'm very familiar with Edmunds because I was for 7 years, very involved with taking a municipality from insolvency to, you know, a great situation now. So that's exactly what I'm asking for, and that it be made for the public, so that all of us can look at that. And then the Moody's fiscal stress score?
Sure, so, that one's easy. Everyone pulled our bond rating, so we don't have a bond rating anymore. Anthony, maybe I don't wanna put words in your mouth, but maybe you're referring to the state comptroller fiscal stress score?
It could be, but also I know that Moody's gives a rating, and so what it does is it helps when we're going out for loans, for bonds and other things, that we get a lower rate. Credit score, yeah.
Sure. With a high degree of certainty, I can say that the village was fiscally stressed, hence the deficit bonds and bands that we needed. The state, I'll do two parts to this question. One, the state comptroller does their own fiscal stress monitoring score, and to do that score and get that score, you need to submit your AFR timely. And so we have not done that in 4 years. And so we do not, if you were to look on the state comptroller's website, we do not have a fiscal stress score because we were non-compliant with our AFRs. For the 25 period, we will have our AFR completed and filed on time. And so for the first time, you can expect, good, bad, or indifferent, you can expect the village to have a fiscal stress score from the state comptroller at some point in 2025. And I'll also mention that, with those deficit bands, we're under the thumb of the state comptroller. They're going to be scrutinizing this budget that the current administration's putting together. They're going to be asking loads of questions. They're going to want to look at things, and so the state comptroller is going to be pretty involved in this process as well. For Moody's, I'm not as certain, to be totally honest with you, Anthony. I'm certainly not doubting that they do something. I just don't know off the top of my head. I haven't looked at that. But generally, when you don't submit audits on time and you don't have financial information on time, the bond raters just simply pull your bond rating. And so my guess is we do not, as a village, have a bond rating, whether that's through Moody's, S&P, Finch. I would suspect we are not rated.
Understood and sad.
Excuse me?
I said I understand, and that's sad.
Yeah. But hey, we're on the right track now. Again, we'll have the AFR filed on time, so we'll have the OSC stress, and then when we go to and these are different people. There's a whole segregation of duties, but when our financial advisor goes to market the bands, at that point we might get a rating, and we'll see what the market's appetite is for our debt, and that'll play into the interest rate we get.
Thank you, Anthony. Question?
Jeannie Lopez, 26 Newcastle Drive. Question about the bonds that we'll have to get. It's like $2 million, something like that, 2.4 million. What is the time frame? Do we have an idea of what the time frame is that we have to pay it back in? Is it 10 years? Is it 20 years?
It's a 10-year payback. Yes, and there's no way to make like double payments to get 10 years less, you know, like a car loan or something to that effect, or mortgage.
Right, it's not
Yeah, this is 10 years solid. Any other questions? Yes,
Two.
that's fine.
One, I don't know if this was,
Name
oh,
and
Lynn
address.
Jeffries. Going forward, I don't know if it's been in the past or going forward, will there be like some kind of audit or an internal auditor that will, not just once a year, maybe quarterly, 6 months, monthly?
Well, yeah, again, this is a 10-year deal. So we currently send in quarterly reports. And we are, as Brendan had stated earlier, we are under the thumbprint of OSC. To say we're being audited right now for the deficit portion of the financing is off the charts. I mean, the amount of information besides giving them the budget, and the way this process worked is that we needed to give them our preliminary budget, draft budget, 30 days before the adoption process. I gave them all that information, and since then, they've probably asked us for probably in the neighborhood of 40 to 50 different items. So when they're done with that, 5 days prior to us adopting, they're gonna give us their recommendations. And those recommendations will be put inside that budget, whatever they end up being. So yeah, for 10 years, we are going to be under the microscope of the state.
Okay.
So yes, from an auditing standpoint, yes.
My next question.
Next question.
The budget, you all sat down and figured out where the money should go, how much to increase. Some of them are drastic. Where did those numbers come from?
Well, we're gonna talk about that in the next presentation,
Okay.
okay? Yes, question in the back?
Yeah, Eric Woman, 38 Woodfield. I know you said that we currently have a surplus in the funds, but that's gonna be given back to the state to offset some of that ban and that money that we borrowed. Is there any plans to reduce the spending, or for us to not spend all of the income coming in, to start to build some sort of nest egg or savings in those funds that, and correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is are basically at zeros other than whatever we collect?
Can you hear that, Fred?
Yeah, that's a good question, and we've kicked that around, and our attorney who's advising us, at Hawkins Delafield, we've bounced that off him because, what you don't want is to borrow money and then be exactly back where you were. So the question I have as part of the ban issuance process or bond issuance process that we're working on is how much working capital are we allowed to retain? And I think that working capital, it would be another term or a different way of phrasing it to what your question was getting at is, how do we get some money in the bank, reserves, if you will, for scenarios that might be unexpected, so we don't find ourselves in a precarious spot. I don't have a great answer on the working capital. I know that's something though we're looking at to make sure that we are able to retain a little capital. But a couple things. So if you were to look at the 24-25 budget, we budgeted $308,000 of interest expense on our ban. Okay, well, we got a grant for $308,000. What a great opportunity to take that money and potentially set up reserves or build up our fund balance equity so that we're in a better financial shape. Similarly, I think and I forget when this came in, I'm getting my years mixed up. We paid for a street sweeper, and then after the fact, the state was able to give us a grant for the street sweeper. Well, we already paid for it. The money's gone, but now we have this grant, and so I believe in that instance, we set up some kind of capital reserve for the street sweeper. And so these little things are happening where we are building up some surpluses so that we avoid this situation going forward. And I know we're working on that working capital item with our attorney, and it'll be raised with the state comptroller as well as to what we obviously don't want to borrow more than we need, but we do want liquidity, so that we can pay our bills and make sure that everything's functioning the way it should be. Does that help a little?
Yeah, I mean, you hit some of what I was asking about, and I get it, but my question is I know that we don't wanna borrow, we're trying to borrow to get back to zero. But now in the future budget, and I mean, it's hard to tell in this year's budget, because we don't have the quarterly reports to see where we are on our current budget, to see if there are surpluses in that budget that we're not gonna expend. But even in the 2024 year, all of those surpluses are gonna get paid back to the state and us borrowing less money. So we gotta start looking at 2025 and future years, so that we're not continuing to face double-digit tax increases every year. I mean, I know we went several years without tax increases, but we're looking at almost 35% in 2 years. So that's what I'm asking. I also find it difficult to believe that the lawyer can't get us an answer in 11 months. I mean, we knew that we were facing this last year, and we still don't know how much or if we're allowed working revenue.
No, I'm sure he can, I don't recall off the top of my head, and it's an easy follow-up for us to get that information from OSC, and so we can have that readily available for you in a pretty quick turnaround time.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Sean Hager again. Again, with the money he said that may have been put in reserve fund, was it or was it spent?
The 250?
The 130,000, was it from the sweeper? 35, 185? Was that spent or was it put into reserve fund?
That, the 250 for the sweeper, the grant that we got returned.
Yeah, we have it like earmarked,
Yeah.
yeah,
What is it earmarked for?
just for future, I'm gonna discuss it in my budget presentation, but all this excess money that we're getting, we do plan on setting up reserves to offset any future tax levy increases, to reduce future debt payments.
Okay, we could pay some of our debt down, but we have to do something.
Well, and I think the big check here is that we need to wait, as Brendan was talking about, right, getting to the point when we get the 24 audit done, so we actually know where the heck we stand. And then obviously the 25 budget or the 25 audit will start. So we're just, we're trying to make these projections. We totally understand the reserve concept, and whatever money is left over, some money can be set aside for the future fund balance moving forward in the budget. And then some of those dollars can be put into different reserve accounts for equipment, capital projects, whatever, so we don't have to keep, obviously dealing with these double. I mean, it's killing everybody. I mean, it's driving us nuts, to be honest with you. But, if you were here last year, the tax increase was supposed to be 36%. So we took a smaller bite, right, between the tax increase of just doing business and taking care of the deficit. It ended up being the 22. So now we were able to now reduce that number down to 14, 15%. So we're moving in the right direction. It's just, waiting to get through all these audits so we actually know where the hell we stand. And, again, working with OSC and are working with his firm, DST, and working with the other auditing firm that's doing the audits, is PKF. So, you know, simply in 2 years, we've almost caught up 4 or 5 years of getting the budgets in place to get to a point that we can possibly get out and go for a bond rating and see what the heck's out there.
No,
But we're all in the same pain here, at the end of the day. It's insanity, but we're working as diligently, as slowly, and as fast as we can to make sure that, you know, we're setting ourselves up for the future and making sure that we're not gonna obviously be in that position ever again.
No, I understand that, I know you guys are working, and I know that you guys reduced it last year, and I understand that. I don't wanna get too far ahead, because I know there's a presentation on the
Yeah.
2025 budget.
Yeah.
But at first glance of the 2025 budget, we have a certain amount of money coming in, and we're spending every single penny of it at the glance of the budget. What we expect to have and what we have, so there is no intent right now in 2025 to save other than what we may not spend based on our estimates. That's something to consider.
Well, we look at that all the time. I mean, we get to the port of the end, these guys are, and by the way, just I forgot for introductions, but if Chris Finnegan sitting there in the blue sweatshirt, our chief Zaccaro, and our superintendent of DPW, Chris Martino. So we get that, and we try to, you know, business as usual, I hate to say that term, but we're not there, not flaunting the money. This is a super, super tight budget, and we try to manage it at the best we can. Sometimes something happens and it blows an expense code out of the water, and we've got to move money from one account to the other account. But this budget is tight, and we understand that, and we're trying to watch every penny, every dollar that we spend to make sure that it's going in the right way and what we need to spend. Because again, we feel it as well. Anybody else? Question for Brendan at this point? Okay. Brendan, thank you. Appreciate it very much. You're welcome to stay and
course.
keep working. I'm just going to unplug you because I have to move the HDMI over to Leslie's machine.
Okay, all right, guys, I'm gonna hop off. If anything else pops up down the line here, just shoot me a message and I'm happy to respond.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Bye now.
Have a good night.
Kind of touched upon this information already, but just in summary, as Brendan and the mayor mentioned, we are under scrutiny of the OSC. We did submit our tentative budget on January 3rd to the members of our, who are heading our audit review. This process, as mentioned, will continue until the deficit financing debt is paid off. They will examine the tentative budget and make recommendations as deemed appropriate prior to the adoption of the budget. The mayor and the village board will review the recommendations and make adjustments to the tentative budget consistent with those recommendations. And as the mayor mentioned, pretty much every day, I'm in constant contact with them. They'll request information. I've sent them all of our projections, desk salary information, health benefit information, so I do speak with them pretty much almost every day and provide them with the information they're requesting. Just the budget process for this fiscal year. The mayor, board of trustees, and the department heads met over the past few months to compile the 25-26 budget. Each department head submitted their budget to the mayor the board liaison, the treasurer, with their projections at the end of November. The mayor, board liaisons, and the board and the treasurer review each department budget line request, line by line for reasonableness. Just a summary, the tentative budget was posted on the website on January 8th, 2025. The 2025-26 budget reflects the following increases. 14.93% increase in property taxes. There will be no increase in the water and sewer rates. And as mentioned before, this is a decrease from the prior year increase of 21.14%. Some factors affecting this increase of 14.93 is an increase in the health insurance premiums. There was also an increase in the number of employees, active employees receiving benefits over the prior year for single and family coverage. And this budget has an additional one new full-time employee for the DPW department. In this budget is also an increase in the principal and interest payment for the deficit financing of the $65,979. There's an increase in salaries for new employees. We're looking to hire 3 new part-time employees for Village Hall and 1 new full-time employee for the DPW department. There's an increase in paving costs that's not offset by CHIPS reimbursement. The non-property tax revenue was reduced based on actuals to date. 2 of the larger areas were the franchise fees and building department. And the CHIPS was also reduced to reflect what the village is entitled to receive from New York State for the 25-26 fiscal year. This is just a summary of what everyone has in front of them on the budget. Some of the major revenue lines, obviously property taxes, $5,393,000, sales tax, $1,170,000, franchise fees, $107,000, mortgage tax, $150,000, the Washingtonville School District, the SRO, $275,000, and just other revenues of $487,000, get you to the total budget of the $7.5 million. And this is just a summary of the expenditures by function. You have your general government support, $910,000, public safety, $2,769,000, transportation at $1,094,000, culture and recreation, $79,000, home and community services, $33,000, employee benefits, $2,072,000, debt service, $625,000, and that gets you to your expenditure budget of $7.5, which equates to the total revenue. This next slide just shows the increase in the taxes based on their assessed value. Not gonna go through each one, but you can see the first column is the 2024, what your tax payment is currently, and with the increase in taxes, what your projected payment will be. So for a $45,000 assessment in your taxes, you're gonna go up $400 a year, and then we just broke it down by monthly, weekly, and daily. So monthly increase would be $33, the daily 8, and the weekly 8, and the daily $10. So just informational. The next slide is the budget for the water fund. You have your water meter rents, $1,176,000. Your bulk water, $150,000. Interest and penalties of $5,000. Total revenues of $1,331,000. And your expenditures, operations, $120,000. Administration, $648,000. Purification, $155,000. Transmission, $207,000. Employee benefits, $200,000. And total expenditures of $1,330,000. Sewer budget, your sewer meter rents are $1,517,000. Your facility fees are $433,000. Interest and penalties, $5,000. Total revenues, $1,956,000. Expenditures, operations, $1,271,000. Employee benefits, $197,000. thousand, debt service of $486,000, and the total expenses of $1,956,000. Kind of touched upon this before, but just for future budgets, as Brendan mentioned, we received grants from New York State to offset debt payments. These funds will be set up as a reserve for debt service on our balance sheet and will be used to offset future costs for debt, and that will be a reduction in future tax levy increase. As previously mentioned, the tax increase was reduced from 21 to 14. The 25-26 budget accounted for several new hires at Village Hall due to the limited staff and one new hire at DPW. This will be a one-time cost for 25-26 and will not be included in next year's budget, therefore reducing the impact on the 26-27 tax levy increase. And in June of 2025, New York State will certify the deficit financing, and at this time, the debt will be converted to the long-term bond. The current band is the 2.6 and an interest rate of 6.25. Although we don't have a final deficit borrowing amount at this time, the issuance can potentially be lower with a lower interest rate, and this lower payment will reduce the impact on the tax levy for 26-27. And that is my presentation.
Any questions on the presentation at this point? Anthony?
Yeah, so for the SRO, because I noticed in the budget, it was put as an expenditure, but then here is as a revenue. And so on page, the numbers, the pages weren't numbered, but that's line A03120. It has it as an expenditure,
That's the salary for police officers.
and then there it has it as a revenue. So I'm just curious about that, and then why isn't the school district? They do, thank you. All right,
That's why it's real.
all right.
Yeah,
So why is it's here as an expenditure on,
That's the salary for the police officer, and then the school district gives us a reimbursement.
thank you, that does make sense. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I have a question on
Name and address, please.
Artie Jeffries, 149 East Main Street, Washington.
Thank you.
I got a question on the water fund and the sewer fund. We're paying employee benefits out of the water fund. How many employees?
We allocated DPW department to each fund, to
Okay,
water and
so
sewer.
Four
So it's a mix of all the
employees.
employees. And there's 2 employees that are fully water sewer out of DPW.
Oh, there is?
Yeah.
Who's that?
They help out do like jetting, they help out do water meter reads, they help do like water meter fixes, they do a lot of cool stuff.
Part of that, Artie, is the, as you know, during the year when we purchased the new water meter systems
Okay,
and the new meters, we moved somebody into that position,
Okay.
right? Because we didn't want to spend the $850,000 for a consultant contractor to do the
Right.
installs. So we brought it in-house and we're doing it in-house.
that's the only reason why I'm asking, because we used to do the budget a third and a third and a third.
Correct, and it's
But
pretty
now
much
you're
the
doing-
same breakdown amongst
Is it?
all 3 funds, but there'll be 2
Designated
DPW
people.
that are gonna be more because they're dedicated to the water and sewer.
Okay, that's the reason why I'm asking.
Yep. Thank you. Vinnie?
Vinnie Lang, Plymouth Rockport, 2 questions. The 2.7 on the public safety, does that account for the open contract for the police department?
Yes, that's in there.
Yes.
So that accounts for the open contract?
Correct.
Do we have an agreement? Because right now we don't have this.
No, we just come up with, we have just an estimate of what we think could potentially be. Could be higher, could be lower, we don't know, but it's just an estimate in there.
Okay. And speaking of the water meters, are we, the water and sewer, the water per se, the water fund, are we allocating any money More meters in the future?
Yes.
What does that fall under? Is that on the transmission?
Yeah, it's operating supplies, 8340-0415. Operating supplies.
What page is that?
It's not a page, it's the
It's the first
Second-
page of the
first-
water fund budget.
It's the second page to the back. Is that okay, Ben?
How many meters does that buy?
Meters are, what, 350 to 400 bucks a meter, depending on the meter itself?
Depending on the size.
Yeah, depending on the size of the meter, Vinny, it's, I think we've discussed this, it's between $350 and $400. Obviously, bigger, larger meters would be more expensive. But this year, for an example, we've been able to install a little over 100 with our inside manpower. So we hope to probably, what was the estimate that we were thinking? Yeah, so we're budgeting, or we're thinking that we'll be able to get 300 new meters in this year, and moving forward, try to maintain the same schedule. Okay? Bill? Or Paul?
Stay in the water. Let's stay in the water, but I have another one in a second here. The pump station, we don't have a line for pump station repair. I mean, last budget was 115,000, but I don't see it in here.
It's the first time.
Pump station is.
Oh, 100,
on the
okay,
top.
but last year was 115, the adopted budget. So we went down?
I have it as 100.
Okay, last year was 115.
Yeah, we can raise it.
No, I'm just saying, if it went down, fine, but,
That included the equipment line as well.
okay. The next thing, Leslie, where will I find the transportation? What number is transportation in here, in the budget?
Transportation, like what I was presenting.
Expenditure, yeah.
It's all the 5 codes in the A fund. So 5010-100, and all the 5110s, and the 5142s. So some of those 3 categories are transportation.
Okay, I'd have to look at that. I mean, I don't know why do we change, when you say transportation,
Well, that's
The
a
normal
uniform,
person.
that's a New York State Control Uniform System of Accounts, like all the 5,000s are transportation.
okay?
So I just summarized it like that for the screen, but it's spiked out in the actual budget. I mean, we could summarize it better.
It's itemized down from personnel, equipment, sweeper, maintenance, OSHA, curb, sidewalk, supplies. So, I mean,
Yeah,
it is itemized. She just gave you the total.
yeah. I mean,
Based upon-
that doesn't come to me as transportation. Transportation
Well,
That's,
she's
yeah.
using it as an
dial books that
accounting.
we don't have.
I
Another
mean,
thing
the name of
is,
it, we could make any name we,
yeah, but I'm saying, maybe we'll just
For
clarify
New York
it.
State Controller's Office.
but it's something, again, when we did this, because of the previous budget that was not, you know, we basically started this from scratch, right? And when we went with the new financial system, that's where all of these standard codes and accounting practices of New York State were implemented,
Right.
so.
On the revenue side, payment in lieu of taxes, Stone Hill, last year, you got 53,999, but the adopted budget last year was 38,999, and I don't see the pilot program for the solar farm in here. I don't think that's finished yet.
I think that's enough, yeah, I think it's part of this, got lumped in this budget, it's 79.
So the
I
line
have
that
to
says,
take that out. I have to take that out.
okay, we'll separate it out because we do, for the pilot that was generated, we get 15,000 for the solar.
Yeah,
And we just received today, I believe it was 48 or 49,000 for Hub One. And we just received, I guess last week, we received Stone Hills pilot. So we'll break it out so it's itemized, make it easier.
all right.
Because right now it's all bundled to make 79,000, but we'll break it all out.
Can I continue?
Sure.
Anybody else?
Well,
Just a couple, I see that you moved a lot of the stuff like postage and supplies on the contractual codification of laws. We'll start there. We have 0 budgeted, but right now we have 45 new laws on the books, and some of them aren't so new. They go back to 2016. But we don't have a budget for codification of laws, and you're gonna be updating zoning laws. Don't we wanna get that all in the code somewhere?
yeah, we could look at the codification. Let me see what you got here. And I'm looking to see if it might be.
I can strike that out.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that, Paul, thank you. Could be
Am I seeing that the mayor and the board is taking a reduction in salary?
No. That was done once before.
Huh?
No, sir. No, sir.
Well,
Currently, in this budget, my salary is set at 40,000. Deputy mayor was increased $2,000, I believe it was, by 16,000. And the trustees are now 12,500. They went up $2,500.
hold on. For this budget, your salary was 40,000?
Yes. Split amongst the,
So you went from 15, it was last year, it was 15.
correct, last year was 15.
So you went from 15 to 40?
Correct.
You think that's appropriate? I don't know.
Do I think it's appropriate? Well, let's put it this way. Looking around the county, Monroe raised theirs 60,000. A mayor's job in what, and I don't care what I'm doing, it's a full-time job. I did this job in the 90s, it was a part-time job, and it was probably 95 to 11.5, right? So, doing it full-time, putting in countless hours, being mayor, being the budget manager, being MS4 coordinator, heavily involved with title whatever for emergency management of Orange County. I completely think it's justified. A job like this, easily, if you look around at the towns, same job function, they're over 100K. So at 40, I think it's a bump, obviously, but I think it's worth it. And at the end of the day, I think this board needs to be, and for the audience and anybody who's ever interested in running this for a position, would want the position, some because they love what they do, they love their community, and the other side of the coin, is that there is some salary. Because I talk to anybody about what we do and the time we put in, they're saying, there is no way in God's green earth that I would do this.
Could you go over what the deputy was making again, in this contract?
16,
16, and trustees?
12.5.
And I, you know, I agree with you in one respect, but this has always been a community service position. I mean, anybody that ever ran for office that I knew.
And I agree with you, Paul.
I don't, you know, the guy down in Monroe is making $186,000. But that's in Monroe, you know, move to Monroe, I don't know. The
No.
guy in Blooming Grove is making a bunch of money. But that's
Sure.
not the point about making money. It shouldn't be a job. It should be something you wanna do for the community.
Well,
And I think we should take this money, put it together, and finally look at a village manager. Because we're going through these things every 10 years. 2013, we had that last controller's audit. Here we are, 10 years later, we're getting the next controller's audit. So everything is gonna be leveled out and fine here. And then as we go forward, things will start slipping again. In 10 years from now, we'll be sitting here, hopefully I will, and we'll see another audit coming up.
well, like I said, back in the 90s, early 2000s, it was a part-time job. Yeah, I could, and what I did is I would come here before I go to work. I would put an hour to 2 hours in. I would take phone calls at work. They don't care anymore, I'm retired. I would leave work, I would come back here, I'd stay here from 4 to 6, whatever it took, and then we had meetings. But the intensity of this job today, and I'm talking probably, obviously supervisors and other mayors, is so intense that if you're gonna pay a village manager over $100,000, I think the mayor is at least worth 40. And we're making decisions every day, working with the staff every day on critical, moving targets. If anybody wants to come and spend a week with me, a month, spend as much time as you want, I'm happy to have you on my side. Because between meetings, county meetings, state meetings, rental problems at the Stonehill and Hub, renegotiating, working with the property management people, it is more than a full-time job, more than a full-time job. And, you know, before we build a king on the top of the hill that could be our manager, we need to build our staff. And without a bottom foundation, which we don't have, you're no place.
Yeah.
So we need to build our staff, which we're starting to do, at a part-time position. So we're avoiding $45,000 a person in insurance. And everybody's upset about 13. I'm upset about 13, 14, 15%. But if we go and add these full-time positions just in one hit, it's gonna be, you'll be standing on the chair, and so would I. But that's why we're taking little bites to try to get us to a point, again, going back 6 years with no increases, nothing being really critically done, and the staff not here. The staff here, when we came into office, was less than what the hell I had in 97. How? We had full-time accountants, we had full-time water and sewer people, we had a full-time person answering the phones, we had more staff. And it's 25, 30 years later, and we're like scraping the barrel. And it's because of mismanagement and other problems.
And also,
But
you
at the end of the day-
can't get people to work too.
Well,
I mean, you've been trying to find somebody to fill, and what have you got, you know? I mean, so, but we're talking about
we have two
salary. I
people,
just think it's an inappropriate time to
Yeah.
take that increase.
Well, there is never a good time for that, to be honest with you. There's no good time. And be frank with you, like I said, if I didn't think this was deserving of it, and it probably would be a $70,000 or an $80,000 job, Paul,
I think it should
You
be
know what?
something, I think it should be something that should be put as a referendum on the voting in March, and let the people decide. How can you say, I'm gonna give myself a raise?
well,
Some other
unfortunately,
guy did that. What was his name?
who?
Kevin,
Did he give himself a raise?
remember?
No, I don't remember that. But I think it's justified, and you know what? The next guy who's sitting in his seat doesn't want it, and he wants to reduce it to 5K, reduce it to 5K. But when you're in this job, and it's a job, this isn't, it's all about loving this place, and I do. But when I'm putting in the amount of time I'm putting in, there's also that side of the coin. And because it is full-time. When it was part-time, never gave it a second thought. It was the furthest thing from my mind. But in today's environment, it's a different world.
I would ask that you just consider putting on a referendum, to let the people give you the raise, not you give yourself a raise.
Well, it's, I think if anything, that would be something that would need to be done next year. But, because it takes, I think, a year for that to come into play. But, I feel it's justified. Russ?
Right. You were, I don't know if you're comparing villages to towns. Towns are usually 5 to 10 times larger than a village, whereas they have a lot more money to spend.
Right,
This is a village.
I get it. That's why it's 40 and they're 125.
Now, are you, if you get this, are you gonna be getting benefits, or is anybody
No.
on this board
No
getting
benefits.
benefits or anything else?
No, this is
And that's-
truly salary only.
And what
salary
percentage
only.
is that compared to?
There's
like,
no
what
overtime.
PD's getting and the
I'm sorry?
DPW? What percentage of a raise is that compared to DPW
I
gets
don't know.
or
I
PD
didn't-
gets?
I didn't, when we did this survey last year and we had the same conversation, we looked at it and the 40 was middle to lower side. There were guys making 60, 70 above the, I think in the Monroe situation, he's probably in the 80s and 90s by
In the
now.
village or the town?
I think it's the village. Yeah.
See if I can find
Yeah,
that.
find it, I mean, but, you know, most of the supervisors, same job, same amount of time, same meetings, and I get it, but that's, your point is well taken, they're bigger, more revenue, and they can do it.
And when you say supervisors, that's a town, mayors are villages.
Right, I get it, and that's why my point is agreeing with you that larger towns, more revenue, can afford to pay their supervisor over 100K. But I'm talking about $40,000 versus, you know, even what this job would probably be worth.
It would look a lot better if you just stated it instead of showing it in
Well,
3 or 4
it gets
different
split,
spots.
and but it does get advertised, and it was coming up here, I have it right in front of me that we were gonna talk about it. Nothing to be hidden, transparency. And it was advertised in the newspapers and whatever else per law.
I think it should be done in a referendum, same as Paul.
Okay, appreciate it.
I appreciate the job everybody's doing, but it's, the deficit we're in, it just seems like a lot right now. As it was last year too.
Go ahead.
Employee benefits, general funds, the state retirement, and the police and the health benefits are really off kilter. I mean, did you like move funds from one to the other, budget-wise?
Which one are you talking about first?
Well, the
You're
water
saying-
one, if you do water, the hospital went down. But on the budget side, on the other side, it went up,
You said water?
water. But this one just says total health benefits, I don't know what page you want to call it. And then the same with the retirement, it went down. That technically goes up because of the percentage you pay.
And that's just changing the way it was allocated, because now that we have the two employees now are in water sewer, so the allocation changed a little bit from last year. And this is a fixed bill that we get from New York State, so it kind of fluctuates from year to year.
So how do you know how to budget? You have 2 new employees for the water?
Well, 2 DPW employees moved over to water sewer.
So they're in
So
water, they're in the
100%.
sewer, not in the water budget.
They're in water sewer, 50/50. And then the health benefits, because we hired one new full-time DPW.
So it goes up 216,000.
No, then we had, a change from last year's budget to this year's budget. There was, I think, 3 new single people came on benefits and 2 full-timers. So that's a significant.
All under the water and
Bulk of it was
DPW?
under general fund.
That's $216,000 though.
I mean, it's
Single people, it's only
$40,000 a year
30,000, 35,000 a year, so for three.
$40,000 a year for health and family coverage.
Oh, I
And
believe
then we
it.
project an increase, obviously, we don't know what it's gonna be, but
Right,
there's a.
because I deal with health and
Yeah.
retirement in my job, so I get it.
Yeah.
But 216,000 for 3 people does not make sense,
Well, that's,
whether they're family or not.
well, it's 3 new single, 2 family, a new full-timer, and then a projected increase.
That's just what
It's significant, I know.
Is that a state? What insurance is that? Is it a private insurance company?
It's a municipal
state?
insurance, no, it's called Night Shift.
Night shift? Okay.
Yeah.
In the back?
Joe Mendez, Full Road. I just want to go back to the salary conversation real quick. I just want anybody in this room to realize that if you want anybody to give a shit about anything that we do in this place, they need to be compensated. 100%. And I say this, I'm a police officer in this village. I live in this village. I'm also the PBA president of the police department for a contract we're trying to negotiate. So I understand money is tight, but I fully endorse everybody up here getting a raise. The mayor and I had a conversation one day in his office. It's an $80,000 a year position in my opinion. Would anybody in this room do any one of these jobs for the money that they do? Because if you would, you'd be up there doing it. That's why these elections run uncontested, because nobody gives a shit. Nobody cares. It's always the same people running. So these people need to be compensated for what they do. Again, I may not agree with everybody up there, we may not all get along, but that being said, if you want anybody that cares, it needs to be worth it. Well, you just made a comment about, I think it's hard to find people that want to work. How do you find people that want to work for $14,000 when you can't find people that want to work for $50, $60, $70, $80,000? People got to be compensated. They put the time in regardless. They deserve it, 100%. Go ahead.
Thank you. Andrew?
Anthony?
Yes, sir.
That's right. So certainly I understand inheriting problems from a previous administration. So, my heart goes out to you. And certainly I understand the salary. I was an elected official for 7 years with a lower salary, a bigger population. So the salary, when I look at it, it is right in line. I do understand what they're saying, you put it up because at the county level, they voted for an increase, but it's for next year. And at the other municipality that I was from, they did put it up for a referendum, for the people to come. It still passed because the people understand. It is a tremendous amount of work. And so, with that, I'm just curious while I have the time about some other budget things. So is this the time that I could ask
Sure.
that
Yeah.
as well? Thank you. So for the overtime and for the comp time, I'm not sure how that's being managed. And so that's where that quarterly statement would really just help to say, okay, we're on track, because yes, we do expect sometimes workers will have overtime, or there's comp time or other things.
Right.
And so that would just really help. And then if we have employees that are out on disability but ready for retirement, if we encourage them to go for that retirement, that will help us with the budget. And then I noticed that we don't have properties here divided up into homestead and non-homestead. That's a choice, some places make that choice, some places don't, it's not mandatory. But my final question is, on top of those other questions, and I can repeat them if you want, like what are we doing for the future for revenue to bring in revenue so that it's not totally on the homeowners?
Well, that's a good question. So we're 2.5 square miles. We have one piece of property left to develop or to be developed. You know, the major piece of that, I wanna kinda draw it back and come around full circle to our comprehensive plan, right? The meetings that we've been having and the planning and thinking about what anybody wants this village to be in the next 15 to 20 years, 25 years. Most of the stuff that came back on those meetings was they want the village pretty much to be maintained the way it is. They want it to be residential. They're not really potentially looking at more industrial or something like that. I mean, we have an industrial area, which is, you know, bringing in some nice tax revenues. But the only place that we could really point to at the moment is when businesses are sold and buildings are potentially flipped, and say a gas station gets removed and it's gonna be, you know, I'll just say a strip mall. Something that will be, you know, potentially giving us some more revenue. And that piece of property, it depends on, you know, what comes down there, what's presented, what's kind of, what the developer is thinking about. We have a section of that property kind of zoned for, similar to, if you know, my example last week, it was Goshen Hatfield Lane. 2-story office buildings, things that are rateables, and you can get some money. But that's something, as the community changes, then, you know, the government and the people need to talk and figure out what they want to do. What do you want to make that piece of property? Are you interested now in 4-story buildings, or what do you want to do? But, you know, most of the feedback was, you know, bedroom community. And that's the way this was set up. I mean, the charters, when you look at Middletown and you look at Newburgh, those were the cities, and the anchors in between were bedroom communities with their downtowns and you know, village-type settings. So, you know, until the folks say something different, you know, we're plotting the course of what they asked us to do.
And the other questions was, how are we managing overtime? How are we managing comp time? Are there employees on disability that can move into retirement?
Well, we really don't have anybody, I want to say on disability. We do have a police officer who was out for some period of time due to an incident, and he's, you know, working himself through there. Chief, I don't know if you want to step up, but beyond that, I don't believe there's anybody else on any of our staffs that's ready to go. We just had a police officer, one of our detectives retire as of last week, and, you know, we're looking to obviously refill that position. We had an SRO for the school, left in August. We're replacing that position. You know, this is what I was trying to get to before. You know, there's not a lot of fluff in what we do. We don't just hire guys to hire guys, where it's a one-for-one replacement. And the additional person in DPW, like we talked about, is really to enhance and help get these water meters in, so we don't have to walk, and you have some software on your phone and you can know what's going on with your water every minute of every day. And when we do water and sewer billing, we don't have to take our crew of 11 or 12 and walk the village for 2 or 3 days to capture and do water meter readings. And the way we're doing it now is so antiquated. It's set up for failure. Everything is data entry.
So certainly I'm a fan of the smart meters.
Yeah, and the overtime
Yeah.
is managed by the department heads. And we manage it and we look at it. So
Do
again,
you use
we
a
don't.
software for that, or?
Software, well, it's in our reporting, our payroll reporting on a weekly basis.
In the ADS? Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, sir.
Eric Bowman, 38 Woodfield. Just a couple questions. One, you know, I was here last year when we were going through the same thing, and you guys were talking about, and we were talking about possible ways of generating revenue for the village. These special events, charging them fees, charging them to offset the police overtime. You know, I'm sure the chief would appreciate being able to recoup some of the overtime that he's got to spend there to put additional patrols out there to keep this village safe. But we do these special events, which seem to benefit a couple of businesses in the village, And it's a good time for everybody in the village, don't get me wrong, but it costs us money, and we don't do anything to recoup it. We have these special event runs that they shut down large portions of the village for. Have we explored that? Have we explored further consolidation with the town on areas that we talked about? I know we're saving money with the building inspector and that aspect. I know, so that was a step in that direction, but are there other avenues, like the justice, their court? Are there other things that we can do? Have they been explored?
Well, you touch on court, so we do have 2 judges, and we have a full-time court clerk. Technically, that could go away, and it becomes the responsibility of the town. Some time ago, we had an assessor department here. That went away, and the responsibility became the town's. That's their obligation as being in town. We do a lot of work with the DPW, some formal, some informal, sharing of equipment, manpower, saving thousands of dollars. I'll just introduce, not to embarrass him, but Wayne Kirkpatrick, he's the superintendent of the highway department in Blooming Grove. And we have a really good relationship with him and the town. And when we share, we do paving projects together. We borrow his bucket truck. So all these little things that we do end up saving us money in the long run. They assist us in plowing, and really anything we don't have a piece of equipment for, that we don't have to go rent, we lean on them. And 99% of the time, they're always there. If a piece of equipment is down, we've got to go elsewhere. But we are looking to do some IMAs with other municipalities so that we could be prepared if something comes up, that we can respond to it, rather than going out and buying a piece of equipment. One piece of equipment I think we would really need is a vac truck, but in today's world, New York State really just looks at you and says, well, you want a vac truck, we're not gonna just give you money. You've gotta take the extra step, and we want you to have an IMA. And I've called different municipalities, and when the time is right, we'll potentially go for a grant. And they're talking to their boards, to the mayors and supervisors, that potentially myself and, for an example, New Windsor, maybe Cornwall, whoever, and we share the unit, because that's cost savings across the board. And that $500,000 a piece of equipment is not gonna cost us $500,000. It's spread, and it's usually a grant. So those are the kind of things that we're really looking at.
Have you looked at anything with special events, trying to recoup some money out of that?
We have had some conversations towards the end of last year, like winter time here, about creating fees for the, like our event committee, right? Because they go out and they get a vendor. They go out and, be it a pop-up tent vendor, or be it food vendors, or for any of those events, and looking at, what's the threshold before the vendors aren't gonna show up. They're paying $100 now, we charge them another $50 to offset a little bit of the overtime. Is that gonna chase people away?
Well, where's that 100 going now?
It's going into account being used for the next event. It's constantly rolled over.
Yeah, I only ask because I know major cities, New York City, they charge for all of those major events. New York City Marathon, NYPD gets paid, Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority, MTA Bridges gets paid to offset the overtime costs, the wear and tear on their vehicles, the things that are, shut down. For all of those major events that shut down large portions, anything we can do to try and recoup something is a plus.
Yeah.
Even if it's $10 a vendor.
Yeah.
You get 10 vendors, that's $100 more. I mean,
It's something.
pennies build dollars.
Yeah, you're right. That's the old adage, you're right. We're not a Chase Bank in the city, or doing the 26-mile run, right? New York City Marathon. We can't go to our vendors and our people because we're small business people. We drive everybody either through the toilet or we're just done. So at the end of the day, whatever that threshold is, we would like to go at it, and be it $100 or whatever it is, we'll offset that, put that in account for the overtime that's being spent. Excuse me.
We've also discussed about some of the events where they come up with their own, some security rather than all of our PD.
Yeah.
That's another way to look at it. I mean, I don't wanna see these guys not,
No.
have the
everybody-
opportunity
look,
to make money.
If you were
and-
here last year, we
But-
did a show of hands because that was a discussion in here. Do you want us to move forward with supporting the events? And I asked for an informal show of hands because there was some, dispute about it.
And
And everybody in the room, I think there were only 2 hands that were in opposition, and everybody else wanted to keep the events going.
Yeah. And not that it takes any away from the police department, but just so you know too, I believe it was either Witchingtonville, I think it was Witchingtonville, they did bring in their own security people. So they hired like, a firm, and I believe there were 3 or 4 security guards besides our police department. So it allowed them to really pay attention to what they need to, and our guys or the security guards were directing traffic, handling parking, and doing the menial things that our police really should be paying attention to the high level stuff.
I
So,
mean, I know you guys don't run the event committee, but have we talked about, the events for the village, charging non-residents $5 fee to be part of that, that's another way. And then the village charges them,
yeah, that's a
for
good
the
idea.
use of land or,
Yeah, we need to
whatever.
dive back into it, because we have a fee schedule, we can change things by resolution, and, the event committee, we just met with them just to talk about some dates for this, for the new coming year, and, we'll have that conversation.
Also, we just recently revised our fee schedule for the building department, so we were quite low, and we upped those fees as well.
Anyone else? Yes?
I said, do we still have DPW working on Saturdays as a stipulation of employment? Now,
No.
that was a money saver, I thought.
Yes.
So did you do
But
away with that?
based upon the staffing back then, we felt those 2 guys really weren't doing enough hard stuff, because there was only 2 guys.
Yeah.
So we felt bring them back into the Monday through Friday, but we have an agreement where if we need to have a weekend or a Saturday work, they basically will not work a weekday, and they'll work the Saturday.
Okay.
So it still works out. Is that right, Chris? Did I explain it okay? Okay.
Sounds fair.
Yeah, and they like it too, so it's a win-win for everybody. Anyone else? Okay, if not, then can I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion to close.
We have
Can I have
another,
a second?
we have another hearing coming up?
I'm sorry?
Is there another hearing coming up? Another budget presentation? Somebody who couldn't make this one?
I was good, well.
You're not gonna
with
adopt
the-
it until the 4th of February, you said.
Yeah, so I was gonna leave it open for written comments at the end of the day for 14 days,
What
if
about the
anybody
changes
wanted
from the
to.
state? When do those come down?
Sorry?
The changes that would come down from the state after you submit?
We won't know until 5 days before we adopt on the 3rd of February. So when we get it, depending on what it is, we'll share it. We'll put it out there and let you know what their recommendations are. Because like I said, they're asking for everything sideways, upside down, and on a 45-degree angle.
now, are their recommendations mandates or are they recommendations?
Mandates.
Okay.
That's the way I read it.
oh,
They're calling it recommendation.
Yeah, they call it a recommendation, but
But we have, whatever they say, we have to do.
in state law, it says that we have to implement what they do. And that's why they're giving it to you like 5 days before you would adopt your budget. Okay. So, can I have a second? Yeah, so we'll close the public hearing, but we'll be open for public comment. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out, and written or oral comments, or whatever comments, for a period of 14 days. Because it'll be close, that 14-day window will be closed when we're waiting for the state to get back to us on, their response. So we just want to kind of marry everything together if there's anything out there. And your comments were really great tonight. We will definitely take a look at, the quarterly reports, Anthony, great idea. we'll definitely take a look at that and get that implemented. Okay, we have a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good seeing you.
I have a motion to close the meeting. I have a second to close the meeting. All in favor? Thank you.
That's your fault.